Welcome back to the Supercoach Hub BBL podcast. I'm Nathan from Supercoach Guns. With me today, I've got a very special guest. He's the News Corp digital sports producer and one of the lead contributors to Supercoach BBL. It's Tim Michell. Tim, how you going?
Yeah, good, Nate. Thanks for having me on, mate. Pretty chaotic first round, wasn't it? I'm sure most KFC super coaches out there are pretty happy to see the back of it after Brisbane Heat's triple turned into a double, and then we had the washout. But it meant we haven't seen the strikers play yet as well, and obviously, that chaos with the pitch down in Geelong as well. So pretty interesting 5 or 6 days of BBL, but I managed to come out of it with a score just over sort of 1,200. So personally, sort of reasonably happy with where the team's at after round one, but we've got some big decisions to make about how many sort of strikers we're going to go with and how I'm going to go about getting Matt Short into my team for the double as well.
Yeah, so I'm in a similar position. I'm just under 1,200. I got 1190. I'm pretty happy with how the round went, considering all the chaos that unfolded. But again, I'm also thinking about how to get Matt Short. Admittedly, I did a bit of planning, so I owned Jai last round, so that's a pretty easy swap. But it did mean that I don't actually have any strikers in my starting team, and so I'm looking at potentially using a boost to get to 4 strikers if I want to go that way. Otherwise, I'm pretty happy with 3.
Yeah, well, I don't like Matt Short. Just looks like the obvious one, sort of the must have, doesn't he? I'm not completely sold on how much he's going to bowl. Like they've got quite an interesting lineup, which is why it would have been nice to see them play in round one, just to see sort of how their bowling lineup might share the overs. Because now they've brought in James Bazley from the Heat. They've also brought in Jamie Overton via the draft as well. You think those two are both going to pick up some overs. Do they play Ben Menenti or Cameron Boyce? We don't know yet. I've stashed Ben Menenti, so I'm hoping that it is Menenti that is going to be their spinner without Rashid Khan there this year. And then do they play all of Henry Thornton, Wes Agar, and David Payne, who's come in as the replacement for Rashid Khan? We sort of wait and see that as well. I assume Payne's going to play because they brought him out here for a reason. But do they play Agar, Thornton, and Payne in the same team with those two other all rounders? Like we just don't know. So I think that was probably one of the disappointing factors out of round one. Like it would have been so nice to see the strikers play, but we don't sort of have any indication yet of what their 11 might look like beyond the fact that they've sort of told us that, both shorts are going to open. So I think Darcy Short looks like a good cheapie this week. Matt Short looks like a must-have, but some interesting decisions to be made on which other strikers we go with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not quite sure. I think I want Payne, and I think I want Matthew Short and Darcy Short. So if I feel like there's a full striker that I really want, I'll probably do the boost. Otherwise, I might just save the cash. Well, let's get straight into a review of round one. Now we'll start out with the Stars against the Heat. Colin Munro, he had a really good game. Came out, scored 99 not out, kick off the season. He was good to watch.
Oh, he was amazing. Pretty stiff too. He would have picked up those extra 10 points if he'd got to 100, but Max Bryant hit the last couple of balls of the Brisbane Heat innings for 4 and couldn't get Munro back on strike. So I think that was one of the big decisions that had to be made in round one, especially for those that didn't go with a loophole, like were you going to captain Nisa after he was named in the team after pulling out of the Prime Minister's 11, or do you go with Colin Munro? And I think the final stats are about 7% captain, straight captain Munro, and about 7% had the vice captain on him. So you would have traded in Nickel Chowdhury or one of the vice captain, or one of the loophole options, I should say, to take that score after Munro started the season so well. Yeah, so people with Munro as captain or vice captain in round one, they thought they were absolutely laughing, and it's given them a pretty big leg up on the rest of the competition after he ended up scoring 190.
Yeah, it's scary to think about what it could have been had they played 3 games in the end. It could have
Yeah,
easily been 250, 300 sort of thing.
yeah, absolutely, and that would have been massive, wouldn't it? It was probably one of the biggest things we were thinking going into this super round and potential triple. Like if you got your captaincy wrong or if you got it right, it could have been the difference between 200 or 300 points, and it would take the best part of a season sort of try and make that up if you got it wrong. So like maybe in a way it's a good thing that it's kept the competition a little bit tighter. They didn't play that third game, the Brisbane Heat, but yeah, I think you're in a pretty good position if you captain Colin Munro in round one, and he looked really good in both games as well. But there's an interesting call to be made now before round two as to whether you keep him, try and get a bit more cash generation out of him, or whether you use his value to maybe help you get Matt Short for this next round.
Yeah, he's currently on my list as a very reluctant sell, but what I might have to make if I want to stay with the pack with the strike with in terms of the amount of strikers players. I think there'll be a few people in that sort of situation, and it'll be a shame because he should reach, 190, 200 next round, but yeah, you might have to forego the cash to get Matt Short. Now, the Melbourne Stars, they haven't got off to a very good start by any stretch, but it's clear that Glenn Maxwell is going to be pivotal to the success of the Stars. It's all going to have to happen through him, pretty much, if they have any sort of success this season.
Yeah, mate. Sort of no surprise, is it, that like Glenn Maxwell, with the form he was coming into the BBL in as well, that he's just going to be so integral to that Stars team. But he sort of carried them on his shoulders for a few seasons now, and they missed him so much last season when he was out with the broken leg too. So there was only three Stars in that game that scored more than 25 points, and one of them was Joel Paris, who scored 26. So I think Hilton Cartwright had a pretty decent start to the year too. Not that I'd be recommending picking him in sort of his role batting at number five or number six for the Stars, probably number six when Glenn Maxwell slots back into that team when they're back after their bye in round two. But yeah, I think if you are sort of one of the very few coaches out there that doesn't have Glenn Maxwell, I'd be moving heaven and earth to make sure he's in your team by round three when the Stars play again, because yeah, he's already said that he's only going to miss one game, which was the second game of that round one double. So we'll be able to get him back for round three. But yeah, the rest of the Stars, like apart from, I don't know, I thought Osama Mir bowled pretty well in the second game, which I'm sure we're going to go through. But yeah, that first game was just a complete write-off. If you loaded up on Brisbane Heat bowlers, you would have been absolutely laughing with the way that the Stars batted in that game.
Yep. Okay. And then game number two, I've got the Renegades and the Sixers. So Will Sutherland, he had an absolute breakout. Well, not breakout game. He was already probably had his breakout season last year, but he had a massive game uh, to open his season. 2 wickets, 2 for 21, I think it might have been, and 50 as well. Geez, he's really come along as a cricketer in the last year and a half, sort of thing.
Yeah, he was awesome, wasn't he, Nath? Sheffield Shield captain now for Victoria, vice captain for the Renegades as well, and took a couple of wickets just when it looked like the Sixers were going to potentially post sort of in excess of 200 in that game. So that combined with his sort of lower order hitting as well, I think he got to 50 in the end to boost his score that little bit more with a Supercoach half century bonus that he gets. So yeah, to get up to 151 was a huge result. And I don't know what you reckon, mate, but yeah, his price has already gone up. What was it by more than 20k? So he's up to 181,500, and we know that the Renegades play another double in round three as well. So like, if you're one of those people that didn't start with Will Sutherland, and we know he's got a minus 16 break even this week, like would you be getting him in this week as more of a priority than a striker, knowing that he's probably going to cost 200k, or you're just factoring him into your trade plans next week if you don't have him?
I guess yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because he does seem to like, yeah, he's 180 and he's probably going to be 200 next week, as you say. And unless you're not committed on owning Matt Short for a large part of the season, then I probably would try and bring him in this week. That could be where you say, you know what, I've already got a striker or two on my bench. I'll just go get Will Sutherland this week. But I think it comes down to team composition. So if you don't have any strikers, then I think you're going to just have to pay up in round three. But in saying that, if you do have some, I think you can make him a priority.
Yeah, I think like your position is not a bad one where you start Jai Richardson and then you flip him to Matt Short, and then you can probably turn Matt Short into Will Sutherland in round three,
Yeah.
and you've
So,
effectively just
yeah,
traded those guys on each round.
exactly. Now, admittedly, I'm in a well. I've done well because I started Will Sutherland. I was very high on him in the preseason, But a guy like Quinton de Kock, for example, he's not going to, even though he had a quiet second game due to the abandoned game, like he's still not going to be cheap just to start round three. You'd think, but you could easily make some big coin off flipping Matt Short to Quinton de Kock ahead of that round three double.
Yep, no, that's another really good point. So the other standout for me, I missed him unfortunately in the out of that game, was Jake Fraser McGurk, who almost got a 50, so he could have scored even better. But he just looked awesome, and I sort of felt a bit for people that started Jake Fraser McGurk because he scored zero in that second game, as you mentioned, with it being called off without the Renegades batting down in Geelong, and he would have had a huge price rise. Like he went up by about 10k as it is anyway, from 62,500. Yeah, pretty much right on 10k, 9,900 he went up. But that could have easily been 30 or 40k if they'd played another game, and he'd done okay in round one. So, yeah, I think he looks like he's going to be one of the sort of real cash cows potentially this season. But the only sort of slight concern I have about him, and I was thinking about boosting even to maybe get him in this week to not miss out on the cash generation, but I'm mindful of the fact that Sean Marsh is probably going to come back, and I think Sean Marsh has probably got a bat in the top three, if not sort of the top four, which means Jake Fraser McGurk's probably the man to get pushed down because I think Aaron Finch is pretty set at number 4. So, yeah, do I want Jake Fraser McGurk if he's playing as a number 5 or a number 6 bat? Like, I'm not as sold on his role once Sean Marsh comes back.
Yeah, it's all about, I guess with him, it's about making the cash whilst he's still got this role, and seeing how much you can squeeze out of him because, I mean, he's looking really good. But as you say, there's a few people to come back in, particularly Sean Marsh, who, yeah, bats top three very regularly. Um, I'll move to game four, and it's a very quick point, and it just says here, imagine if Jai got to bowl on that pitch. I think he would have killed someone.
Oh mate, yeah, it was. It could have been very ugly, couldn't it? Like Will Sutherland, yeah,
Yeah,
he bowls a pretty decent, like heavy ball, probably in the sort of mid to high 120s. But Joe Richardson's pushing 150k, and yeah, that
yeah.
that could have been seriously ugly if he got let loose on that Geelong pitch. So I think I tweeted something to that effect, like he was in for a pretty big night if they continued to play, but obviously we know that wasn't the case. So I'm sure lots of people probably saw the sort of official post that went up from the Supercoach BBL account as well, and we did wait a couple of days to sort of publicly announce what we were going to do with that game, and that was just because we had to have a few discussions and stuff behind the scenes. But ultimately, it was just decided that, yeah, we had to go with sort of precedents that had been set in previous seasons. And I know that didn't necessarily keep everyone happy or make everyone happy, which was probably never going to be the case. But yeah, the precedents that we've had in sort of washed out games or any called out games. If you remember the game that got smoked out in Canberra, I think between the Thunder and the Strikers, maybe 2 or 3 seasons ago, point
Yeah.
stood there. And then the closest example that I could remember to a game that only lasted about 7 overs, as the one did the other night, was a washed out game between the Sixers and the Hurricanes 3 years ago now. And the point stood from that game as well. So pretty unfortunate for anyone that had sort of Renegades. I know I had Kane Richardson, so I had to cop at 26, and I had Joe Clark, so he didn't get to bat either in that game, which was a bummer. But yeah, even more so for people that paid up for some of the Perth Scorchers players. But look, if you didn't, and I know Perth Scorchers double's not coming up until round 6 now, but some of those guys are going to be really well priced in round 6, so that might be the only silver lining to come out of what went on down in Geelong.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I was disappointed that a game didn't go ahead, but yeah, it made sense. There was that one spot on the pitch. Will Sutherland just kept nailing, and we kept,
Mm.
getting. It was a good length delivery, but it kept going up into the armpit of Josh Inglis. So I think it's fair enough that they called it off. As for the Renegades, it's going to make, as you say, we'll make them nice and cheap for round three. Who We'll move to the game number 5. Um, do you think the Hobart Hurricanes might bring in someone like Chowdhury or Mitch Owen and make Corey Anderson their fifth bowler? Because if so, he's slightly tempting.
Yeah, he's got a really good break even, sort of mid 20s this week, doesn't he? After he scored 96, and he bowled really well. Like that Launceston pitch sort of suited him, kind of slightly slower than your sort of fast medium bowlers, and was able to use his swing bowling to his advantage. So he's already gone up a bit in price, and going to again with a negative break even going into round two. So I think that's, our predicted teams went up on sort of the News Corp websites on the same day that we're recording this, so Friday morning. And I think, I'm predicting that they will bring in a batsman. I don't know whether it'll be that they go with sort of that all-rounder type that you floated there, or maybe that they even bring in like Mac Wright or Sam Heaslett, who they signed during the off-season too, because their batting looks like it was a bit exposed when they had Chris Jordan batting at number 7. So it wouldn't shock me if they wanted to push Jordan down a spot to 8, and maybe they use this injury to Riley Meredith just to shake up their lineup a bit, bring one of those guys in to strengthen the middle order. And they now know that they've got Corey Anderson there as a sort of pretty reliable bowling option to turn to, or someone like Tim David that he could share overs with as well, who didn't bowl in Launceston. So I think if they do go down that path, that only strengthens the case that Corey Anderson has as a pretty decent Supercoach option this year, because, sort of batting at number 6 and 7 and bowling regularly, like as we're seeing with Tom Curran to start this year, like it doesn't get much better than that as far as a Supercoach role goes.
Yeah, and the only disappointing thing will be is that you can't really bring him in this round at 125
No.
because you've got these strikers and you've got other priority buys. You've sort of got to pay up, hypothetically, 140,000 for him in round 3 if you were desperate for him and you thought that the role was really good. I'll consider it, but I don't know. He might be just one that gets away.
Yeah, I think so, mate. So I like, and I mentioned Tom Curran there too, and I know we talked about the Sixers. This was their second game of their double, and they were one of only 2 teams to get in. But it was really nice to see Tom Curran bounce back, because he was pretty. Well, I thought he bowled okay in the first game, but like just didn't sort of get the rewards. It was more Ben Dwarshuis and a couple other guys that cashed in and got all the Supercoach points in that first game. So to see Tom Curran score 104 was great, and I know anyone who captained him would have been sort of really happy with that return as well. But yeah, Ben Dwarshuis that I just mentioned, like he was one of the sort of pretty incredible stories. I think he lost his dad a couple of days before the BBL started, still backed up and played, and he ended up being sort of one of the best point of difference picks in Supercoach. Not that sort of when you those sort of things happen in your family, that anything like sort of fantasy sport is all that relevant, obviously. But I was sort of really impressed and sort of really respected Ben Dorsh's effort to not only play, but to back up and play so well too for the Sixers. So, huge shout out to the way that he performed in round 1.
Yeah, no, that's right, because it would be so tough. I know if I was in that situation, I probably wouldn't have. If I was in that situation, I wouldn't have played. I wouldn't have thought. But gee, full credit to him for going out there and playing at a high level. Jack Edwards bowled 4 overs in against the Hurricanes. I found that rather interesting. Is that just because Sean Abbott was out and they didn't really want to use Todd Murphy, or what do you think? Is there something there for Jack Edwards this season?
I think they just assessed the pitch conditions, and the pitch was offering a bit for seamers and maybe not as much for spin bowlers. And Steve O'Keefe still got, I think he's 3 overs in. But yeah, Jack Edwards was sort of the one big beneficiary of that. And one of his wickets was like absolutely gifted to him by Matthew Wade. Like that was, you won't see a more ordinary ball than sort of a slow half tracker that Wade somehow hit to fine leg and got himself caught. But I put Jack Edwards on my bench. He was the guy that I picked instead of Jake Fraser McGurk. I was sort of hoping that he might get some overs, and then I was less than optimistic after the first game because Jake Fraser McGurk took him to the cleaners and he only bowled 1 over in that game. But I think, Nath, it was probably just down to the fact that conditions really suited that seamer, and they didn't have Sean Abbott in the team. And Jack Edwards was sort of the beneficiary of that because he picked up the extra overs. But like as far as a trading goes, I'm not really that sold on him because the Sixers don't have that double coming up anytime soon. And yeah, his role might be game to game as to sort of whether he's picking up overs, and batting at number 7. He's not guaranteed to bat every game as well. So I wouldn't be rushing to trade him in just because he looks like he's going to make a bit of cash in the next few rounds.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't. I agree. I don't think he really is a trade in. I just thought that it was interesting that he did. There's situations where he might bowl a fair few overs, and well, I guess situations where he'll bowl 1 or potentially none. So I don't think he's going to be a reliable source of money this season. But It's good to see that he's in the 11 because he has been improving a fair bit. Chris Jordan, like the dude batted at 7 and had a lot of time at the crease, and had the opportunity to bowl in all the good parts of the innings, and he still only managed 20 points. I don't know how he did it, but gee, he made the worst out of a very good role.
Yeah, it should have been like just about like the best role that you can get in Supercoach, as we touched on with Curran and even Edwards there as well, sort of batting around that 6-7 and bowling 4 overs. But I don't know, like I haven't been through necessarily every game that he's played in the BBL, but the feeling that I get with Chris Jordan is that like almost every game he plays, he concedes too many runs to get the economy bonus, and he sort of relies very heavily on taking wickets um, to get many points from his bowling. So a lot of those 20 points that you mentioned there were from his batting. And I'm not necessarily sold on whether he'll be batting at 7 in the games going forward because, like I said, I think Mac Wright or Sam Heazlett might come into that team. So, yeah, Chris Jordan's not someone that I'm desperate to get in, but if he's still at a good price come the Hurricanes double in round 7, I might look at him then. But, yeah, I don't know. Like, I know he's sort of regarded as one of the better death bowlers in T20 cricket and stuff, but every time I watch him play, he goes for about 40 off 4 overs. So, yeah, not someone I'm rushing to get into my team.
Yeah, he hasn't. He's had a troubled big bash record the last few times he's been out here. I know that he's always been, close to relevant, but not really because he's not. He just goes for, as you say, tons of runs, and you know his wicket taking. It can be volatile. That he can go on a streak of no wickets for a couple of games, and then out of the blue he takes three. He's not a very reliable option.
Yep.
I'll move to the Heat and the Thunder now. Um, Spencer Johnson, a very massive letdown this round, unfortunately. 30 points across the two games, and he was a very popular pick.
Yeah, Nath, he was sort of one of the guys I was most worried about leaving out of my team. And I thought that, yeah, he could really sort of burn me. I went with Xavier Bartlett instead, and that worked out to be, yeah, about a sort of 110, 120 point swing. So I was glad I did go with Bartlett instead. But, yeah, like who could have seen that someone like Paul Walter would step up and bowl 4 overs on a pitch that sort of suited that pace off, which isn't necessarily Spencer Johnson's go. So maybe it was just down to conditions. Like we saw that a lot with some of the pitches in round 1 in the BBL, that they'll probably get a bit quicker as the summer goes on. And some of those bowlers that are bowling sort of more pace off or like to bowl with the slower balls like Walter were the ones that sort of really prospered early in the season. But yeah, Spencer Johnson, he was one that I was really worried about not picking, and I felt pretty lucky that he didn't really score all that well and ended up losing about 10k, which I wouldn't have thought was going to happen as well if he played both games. And the only reason that I didn't pick him was because I was worried that he'd get managed because he hadn't played since late September, and I thought if they do play the 3 games, I don't think he's going to play all of them. So that was my justification for leaving him out, and in the end, I got pretty lucky and it worked out really well. But what about the other one, mate, from the Brisbane Heat? Like Walter was great that he got up to sort of 101 and was in the top sort of 11 scorers or so, but no one bigger than Mitch Swepson, 162 points for 71k. Like if you'd started Mitch Swepson, you're on an absolute money train now. He's already made you 30, 35k, and he's just going to keep shooting up in price.
Yeah, Mitch Swepson. I honestly thought um, when everyone came back from the Prime Minister's 11, he might be out of a spot. I didn't think his job security was very good at all. But gee, I think he's probably in that. He's there to stay in that Brisbane Heat team now. Far out. If you have at least one striker on your bench and you don't own Swepson, I think you move heaven and earth to get him at that. What is it, -70 break even or something stupidly low? Um, really worth it because he could make. What does he make if he scores? Just by going onto the field, I think he'd make 20, 30k or something like that.
Yeah, so Supercoach Plus has -70 break even, and if he scores 47 as the projected score here, he goes up 31k. So he scored in excess of that in both games. So yeah, you could be looking at somewhere in that sort of 30 to 40k range, and then likely a negative break even. Not round 3 because they've got the bye, but yeah, round 4 when the heat are back too. So yeah, you could get on at 103k and potentially still make sort of 60 or 70k if you got him this round.
Yeah, he could turn out to be. Well, when I say could, I mean I think I'll say he should turn out to be one of the best cash cows in this part of the season, if not the best. Um, but another contender for the best cash cow in the early season was Tanvi Sanger, who had an equally big start to the year despite only playing one game. He got 94 points, pretty low break even, and he's pretty reasonably priced, around the same price as Swepson, 100,000. Do you own him? And boy, he was good to watch.
Yeah, Nathan, I never had an intention of owning him because I just couldn't get him in my team. I was looking at other cheapies and then did a bit of a shuffle as you do in round 1 and the rolling lockout, and managed to free up a bit of cash. So I think at one point I had David Payne there, and so I was stashing a guy worth almost 140k. But to get to Will Sutherland, which I was really lucky that I bought him in, I needed to free up some cash. So I went Payne down to Sanger, which ended up working out really well because, like you said, Tanvi Sanger's already gone up by almost 20k, and looks like he's going to make us some money before that round 4 double that the Thunder have got too. So I can definitely see why a lot of people are considering boosting early in the season. Let's say they didn't start a lot of strikers, get 3 strikers in, and then get a cash cow like Tanvi Sanger that you might have missed out on before his price goes up too much. Because I think the way that he bowled in Canberra, he was absolutely super, just landing it on a dime. And I think you're going to want him in your Supercoach team for the round 4 double for the Thunder. And you either pay just over 100k now, or come round 4 you might be paying 150, 160k, and makes it a hell of a lot harder to get him in your team at that stage.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think this experience in the World Cup squad, learning off Adam Zampa and the spin coaches for Australia, I think that did him a world of good because he just, he was really consistent in his line length, and he went about it really well, and got 3 wickets at a pretty good economy. Um, Alex Hales, now he's been hopelessly out of form. Um, really, I thought he might bounce back because he always has a big innings early on in the Big Bash, but yeah, nicked off very first ball.
Yeah, it wasn't a good start, was it? My sort of recollection of Alex Hales and his time in the Thunder is he seems to be one of those guys. And for those out there listening that play Supercoach AFL, like that key forwards in AFL seem to go on these runs where like they'll bottom out in the middle of the season. They might start at 500k. It's probably similar to a winger in Supercoach NRL where they'll go on these scoring runs. They'll bottom out at a price maybe 150 or 200k below their starting price. Then they'll get a good draw and they'll score 124 games in a row, and then they'll shoot back up in price and end up back up towards their starting price. And Alex Hales seems to do that most years. Like he'll start at what is he? He's only 125k this year, so it's not a huge price to pay. But most years he gets down to about 70, 80k, goes on a bit of a run. His price ends up in sort of the high hundreds, and then he might sort of, that run of form ends. But he's done that most years, and I would consider him for the double for round 4. But not a guy that I'm necessarily keen to get on any time behind before that. But Ollie Davies is definitely one that caught my eye. Gun in the field, so you can potentially pick up some points there. But although batting at number 4 is not an ideal role, like he was coming into the Big Bash with sort of some of the best form of just about any player in Australia. He got a Sheffield Shield ton for New South Wales, batting line the Marsh Cup too, and we know how quickly he can score. So yeah, Ollie Davies, and he looked pretty decent the other night. His strike rate wasn't great, but wasn't an easy pitch for batting up there in Canberra. I think what was 130 to 150. So Ollie Davies is another one of those Thunder batters that I've got my eye on and I'll be watching pretty closely in the next few rounds before the double.
Yeah, and well, I guess we'll move to the final game of the round, and that was the Stars and the Scorchers. Um, Quick shout out to Sam Harper for averaging 2.5 points in the first 2 games. Um, that takes some skill to score 5 points in 2 games as an opening batsman.
I think the only positive, and like this is a very small positive, but is you can use him as a loophole this round. So
Yeah.
going into round two, it means you can have a look at two of your wicket keepers by putting Sam Harper on the field and using the loophole, swinging them between sort of your wicket keeping bench and your bat bench. So like that's about the only good thing that can be said. Really, it was unfortunately a pretty disastrous start for those that pick Sam Harper, and I think you're probably going to have to stick with him until round three now. Know that the role's there, and just hope that he bounces back because things couldn't have gone much worse in the opening two games for him back at the Stars after his off-season move from the Renegades.
Yeah, I was torn because he had a pretty quick fire century in the Shield, maybe a week or two before Big Bash started, and I was thinking,
Mm.
well, you could go with him, you could, but um, gee, I'd be disappointed if I was an owner for sure. But as you say, I think you just got to stay strong with him. Hamish McKenzie. Now, I made a very well, maybe not a foolish decision, but I made a very rash decision to put Hamish McKenzie on my bench, and he's come along and got nothing in the first game due to the abandoned game, and the second game he's scored 77. He was 42,000. Now he's at 56. Do you think he holds his spot, or is it just going to be one that could have been for super coaches?
Yeah, it's going to be so stiff, isn't it? Just about any other team, you'd be like, this guy's a guarantee to stay. Like he's probably bought himself half a season with how well he bowled, taking 2 for 12 against the Stars. But the Scorchers are about to welcome Ashton Agar back. Like I think he'll be back after he was managed for the first couple of games. So he had a calf injury that sort of had that many had a fairly interrupted pre-season. He did play in one of the late intra-squad matches that Perth Scorchers had and got through, I think, 3 or 4 overs in that game. So the signs were positive, but probably understandably that the Scorchers left him out of their road trip, and now they play Hobart Hurricanes in their next game in round two back in Perth. So I think we'll see Ashton Agar in that game. So it's just a matter of whether Perth wants to go with two spinners, which is not necessarily something that they've done. Like more often than not, when you think back to when they had Fawad Ahmed and Pete Atoglou over there, which is probably a slightly different case because they're sort of really similar bowlers, both leg spinners. Ashton Agar and Mackenzie, obviously both left armers, but they turn it separate ways. So they might offer something a bit different there. But I do think as well as he bowled, like he's going to be really unlucky and he'll probably be one that gets squeezed out for Ashton Agar. And I think in that Scorchers team, the other change is probably likely to be that Cooper Connolly slides down the order, even though he was really good in round one, which is disappointing because that's going to make it harder for him to accumulate Supercoach points and make cash for us. And I think Zach Crawley will probably come in at the top and partner Steve Eskenazi in their next game too. So might be a bit of cash cow pain to come from the Scorchers, unfortunately, which is just the case, as we know, with sort of good teams through Supercoach AFL and NRL, that it's pretty hard for rookies to hold their spot even if they perform well.
Yeah, it's going to be a troubling time because, as you say, we could lose Fraser McGurk, Connolly, Mackenzie. We could lose 3 or 4 of them really quickly if we're not careful. So maybe upgrading one of them isn't too far fetched idea, particularly if their role is already gone after this round, or before this round even. It could be worthwhile just to take one of them to a Swepson or a Sanger or someone at around that early $100,000 mark with a negative break even. Um, we'll move to our initial trade thoughts ahead of round two. What are you thinking? Who are you thinking of trading out, and I guess who are you thinking of trading in?
So I'm mindful of that round three buy, which is I think is going to catch a few people out, Nath, which is the Brisbane Heat and the Strikers. So obviously lots of us loaded up on the Heat for the triple that was meant to be in round one, and then we've got the Strikers on the double in round two, but then they both don't play in round three. So definitely something I'd urge people to do, sort of look at how you're situated for round three before you go and bring in too many strikers this round. But so I'm going to, because of that, I'm trying to move 3 Heat players to 3 strikers this week. So at least I'm not any worse off for round three. Although I might need to trade Aaron Hardy just while his value is sort of nice and high to facilitate some of the trades that I'm hoping to do. So the 3 strikers that I've got in my team at the moment, Matt Short must have. Like was never going to leave him out. And then I brought in David Payne as well, who I think is going to be one of the death bowlers. And as I mentioned, like he was going to be in my starting team, but in the end, I had to move a bit of cash around, so I couldn't stash a guy worth 140k. So I'll bring those two in, like they're sort of non-negotiables for my trades. And then the other one's probably between Jamie Overton, who I'm not sort of completely sold on his role. Like I think he might bat 6 or 7 and maybe bowl a few overs. Like I just don't know how many overs he's going to bowl, which is why I would have liked to see them play in round one just to see what his role exactly was. But if I can get the cash, I think I'll probably pick Wes Agar as my third trade in instead, because I think he's guaranteed to bowl 8 overs over that period. And even though he can be a bit expensive in some games, he's a proven wicket taker in the BBL. So you're likely to get 3-4 wickets, and that's 80 points alone out of that if you can get that over a double from Wes.
Yeah, he always seems to find a way to be a really good pod at certain points every season. I know I've always looked to him around midway through the tournament thinking, okay, how's his form looking? How's his ownership? Are they both compelling? Yes, okay, we'll bring him in. He could be an interesting start for this double because people will look at Matthew Short, Darcy Short, and David Payne as their big 3 strikers. I think they'll be very highly owned and highly traded in. For me personally, I've done that brought in those exact 3 players, and to do that, I've sold Sam Billings, Spencer Johnson, and Jai Richardson. I could do a fourth trade, and therefore boost. But I'm not sure if I want to spend 170,000 straight up for Chris Lynn and have every single one of their top 3 because they're not all going to fire. I'd rather hedge my bets and say that the openers do most of the damage,
Mm.
but I'm
It's
not
going to
sure.
be a
It's a
good
tricky one.
Yeah, he's going to be a good pod again, I think, mate. Like last year, there was only 3 or 4 bat-only players that averaged over 50, and he was one of them. Like most of us probably looked at him in his last season at the Heat a couple of seasons ago and thought he was absolutely cooked. But he goes down to Adelaide, batter-friendly conditions, new home for him, and he really relished it in the sort of 2/3 of the season that he was there last year before he jetted off to the UAE competition. So. Um, I think it could be a really nice pot. And like we saw with Colin Munro, if a batter gets going for a couple of innings in a double, like they can go absolutely huge. And we know with Chris Lynn that sort of the strike rate bonus is very rarely sort of an issue for him. If he gets to that magical 20 mark, more often than not, he's going to bring the strike rate bonus as well. So I think you'll see most people take the safe option and go down the path of picking bowlers. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of sort of risk reward in going for someone like Chris Lynn, albeit like you said, he does cost a fair bit as well. Like you're paying 20 or 30k more than you would for some of these bowling options from the strikers.
Yeah, and I think it'll just depend on how brave you want to be and how confident you are in Lynn as a whole. Um, well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for coming on. Make sure you're following Tim on Twitter and make sure you're following the Supercoach Hub on Twitter.
No, thanks for having me on, Nath. Yeah, awesome to always jump on and chat to some legends from the Supercoach community, and love all the work that you guys are doing in promoting Supercoach. So, to all the listeners, thanks for tuning in. Hope your teams go well, and I think we're up around sort of that 50k mark for sign-ups now for Supercoach BBL. So if you've got any mates or family that haven't signed up to Supercoach yet, yeah, make sure you tell them to get over to supercoach.com.au. You can still win $500 every round, and if you're a Supercoach Plus subscriber, that doubles to 1,000. And I think if you're in the top 11 scorers each round, you get a $15 KFC voucher as well. So that's a pretty good reason to sign up for free at supercoach.com.au. So, like I said, mate, thanks for having me on, and good luck to everyone for the rest of the summer as well. I'm sure I might chat to your audience again, but just in case I don't, yeah, hopefully your teams continue to go well over the next 8 rounds.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.